Um, Thank you everyone for joining us this evening, and welcome to the second one of our webinars. And this one's looking at developing players through competition. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Scott Chappell. I work for the Somerset Cricket Board and also do some coach education within the county as well. This evening we are joined by the 4 performance leads in the Southwest, who between them have a wealth of knowledge and experience of both playing and coaching from the grassroots of the game all the way up to winning the county championship. So the 4 of them that are joining us are Matt Drakeley, who is the pathway head coach at Somerset, a role that he has done for the past 3 years. Matt has played minor counties for Dorset and is a level 4 coach. Sandy Allen has been the coaching and pathways manager for the Devon Cricket Board for the past 4 years. A former Warwickshire cricketer, Sandy has also represented Devon in the minor counties, and he's a level 4 coach as well. Chris Hunkin is the performance manager for Cornwall, a role he has done for the past 4 years. He's played for Somerset and Cornwall and is currently working towards his level 4 qualification. And finally, Richard Scott is the head of performance for Dorset. His playing career included well over 150 games for Hampshire and Gloucestershire. He was head coach of Middlesex from 2009 to 2018, leading them to the 2nd division title in 2011 and the county championship in 2016. Richard is also a level 4 coach. So over the next hour, these guys are going to share their wealth of knowledge and experience with us. And the conversation will be focused around 3 topics that will link into the overall theme. And at the end of each topic, kind of end of each 15 minutes, there'll be an opportunity to ask any questions. So feel free as we go along to add any questions into the chat box, and we'll come to them at the end of each topic. I mentioned on the last webinar, if you were on that one, but I'll mention it again, that I think it's the fantastic thing about these webinars is that all the coaches we have on here from different counties, different environments, all working with different age groups from under 8s through to the adult game with boys and girls as well. I think it's also important to mention that over the next hour, there's going to be a lot of discussion and suggestions, some of which may work for you in your environments and with your players, but others that might not. But hopefully the aim for today is that in the next hour or so, everyone will be able to take a few things away with them that's going to help with their coaching. So we'll get started on our first topic, which is around the purpose or philosophy of junior cricket, whether that's a club, school or performance environment. And Chris, I'm going to hand over to you first to kind of kick us off with that one.
Thank you, Scotty. Yeah, just as it says, really, kind of when we had a discussion about this last week, the key kind of underlying sort of principle that came out was to first of all understand what the purpose of what you were trying to achieve was, whatever environment that is, whether it be a school, a club, or a development county age group, whatever it be, understanding what you're trying to get out of that competition, out of those games, and tailor your coaching as such appropriately from there. And that could be tailored towards certain individuals, developing certain individuals. That could be tailored towards winning games. That could be tailored towards developing players ready for adult cricket, so the transition between junior and adult cricket. So just understanding really what it is you're trying to achieve, and then building on it from there, and then understanding how that message gets relayed across the various people that are involved. So if it's a club, what other people in the club are the other age groups in the club buying into that? If it's transitioning from junior to senior cricket, are the other senior players adults in an adult team, understanding of what the bigger picture is, what you're trying to achieve. So yeah, that purpose, or if you want to call it philosophy, underpins kind of everything that kind of comes from that, really.
Nice. Chunks, I jump in for a sec on that, and I think we're kind of the guys who probably work in county age group pathways and above are probably in quite a fortunate position. I think the challenge comes with some of the guys who work in club cricket and junior cricket, where the challenge is getting 11 players to a ground in the evening after school or on a Sunday morning, phoning around in the week, trying to make sure that the clubhouse is tidied up after a Saturday league game or the doors are open. And I think all of us on the call here and are in quite a fortunate position, and some people struggle with those demands and those issues. And I think, as Scott said at the start, there's a wide range of knowledge and experience on the call. And I think probably arguably the hardest job is probably the Colts managers at club level. And I think a lot of the prep and the things that Chunks talked about can be helped with communication throughout the club and starting those conversations as early as possible. For example, as a club, what is your junior section for? What's your youth section for a club? Is it to win an under-11s trophy in the county? Is it to produce 10 first-team cricketers in the next 5 years? Is it to produce X amount of county players? And this is something that can be done in the off-season. This is something that can be done when we're allowed over a pint, or pick up a phone and have those discussions. I think it would be easy for us at times to sit here and go do X, Y, and Z, but it's not that easy in practice. But I think like anything, the more prepared you are, the easier it is in the long term. And if you sit down as a group of club coaches or district coaches or county age group coaches and say, right, our philosophy is X, Y, and Z, and it might be about actually it's engagement, it's about keeping players in the game, it's about developing club first team cricketers. Actually, that's a really good philosophy to have. And then everything that you then drive forward in the season and in the pre-season then links into that. And actually it's quite an easy thing to do. There's probably been 101 youth league meetings that have gone on recently via Zoom and sorting out however many fixtures, and they're quite good times to sit there and go, look, actually we're a little bit weaker this year. We want to give everyone equal opportunity. We appreciate you're a strong club or you're a weak club, and we'll manage that fixture where we can. And I think we'll probably touch on a little bit that in more detail a bit further on, but it's just an understanding that we're kind of not here to preach, as Scott said, but also a lot of the hard work could be done a little bit in the off season to make your life easier in the season.
Sandy, on that as well, I think the communication element from the club, I think it can be done not only what your philosophy as a group is, a group of coaches, but I think it's important for the parents of players to be aware of that, the players themselves to be aware of that, so that they know what they're involved in. I think it's a far easier conversation to have with someone if you're giving them an opportunity to open the batting one week and then maybe give some other people opportunity the next week. It's far easier to do that if you set that up in advance. And likewise, actually, if you're really open and transparent with what your philosophy as a club is, whether that is to be really focused on just those players that are going to transition into your best teams, that I think that's fine, as long as you can communicate it with other clubs and they're aware of it. I think that the problem becomes when there's these huge voids in matchups where people are turning up a bit blind to games, and ultimately what happens is people don't get the experience that they should get or want to get out of that fixture, and that's the really important thing. Just before I let anyone else jump in, just in the chat box, because I'm really interested in the environments that you work in. So I'm thinking more the school and club environments. Why do you fulfill your role? So why do you fulfill your role as a coach? Why do you fulfill your role as a manager? Be as honest, open, detailed as you want to be, but what are the key drivers for doing that? I'm really interested to know.
Thank you, Drakes, and thank you, gents, as well. I think really good question from Drakes there around what your role or why you coach ultimately, but also some good points that all three of you guys have made, and speaking about philosophy and communication and being open. So if your philosophy as a club is you want to win every trophy going at junior age group level, or your philosophy as a club is we want to have as many of our juniors transitioning into senior cricket as possible, what does that look like on the ground? So for each game by game, what does that look like within those differing philosophies?
I think quite an interesting question for Matt would be that I'm intrigued in as well is what we talk about giving young players different roles at different ages. At what age, Matt, in the Somerset pathway, for example, would you really start getting serious where the younger players have got clearly defined roles? Is that under 14 upwards, or how do you manage that in terms of your pathway?
From a pathway point of view, I think being properly defined wouldn't happen until they start playing more a bigger variety of cricket. So obviously when they're 14, 15, they're generally only playing 50 over cricket with a bit of multi-day cricket where they're still getting the hang of it. As we get into under 18 cricket, that's where probably we start to see openers being more defined. The middle order batters, they might rotate through those roles. But I think before that, there will be clearly defined roles on a day. But I think it's really important for a young batter to still experience the opportunity to open, the opportunity to bat against spin, come in against spin, have to score at the death. Because ultimately, and I remember a coach at Hampshire telling me this, that we can work with these lads all we want and we can give them all the opportunities that we want to, but we might open with someone in junior cricket and he might consider himself always an opener. But you know for sure that when he or she goes into the adult environment, they're likely to not fulfill that role. So we don't want that to be a shock. We want that to be something that they're really adaptable with, and they can take it in their stride. And they've got this big toolbox of experiences that they can go to. And I think that would be the biggest thing for me, that I think we see opening the batting as the role for the best batters, or we watch Test cricket and we see the best batter batting at 3 and we see that as the best opportunity. A player has got to experience all the different things that can happen in cricket, because even you look at our international sides, both men and women, for me, the batters are interchangeable. They can fulfill different roles. We've seen it with Zach Crawley, with Johnny Bairstow. And I know that's thinking a lot higher up the chain, but if actually those players are doing it, then why shouldn't we be encouraging that within our young cricketers? So, yeah, I hope that answers the question, Scotty, but
it does.
Not very early.
No, I think you make some really good points. Just one thing that the audience might want to know is Toby Rowland-Jones opened the batting for his county age groups right the way up through the system, and only really started taking bowling seriously when he went to university, and he went on to play for England. So a really good example that reinforces your point.
I think with that as well, if you look at sides, and if you're bringing a team together, whatever level, there's obviously there'll be gaps in there at places for opportunities, and it's providing your players the best sort of foundations, I suppose, to fulfill those expectations and skills that are required at certain positions in the order, and whether it will be with bat, ball, or fielding positions. And if we can provide enough opportunity in different situations for any of our players stepping into a different environment at a different number in the order or bowling situation or a different fielding position, is only going to stand them in good stead. And sort of, I think we've got a bit of a duty as coaches, really, to make cricketers as kind of rounded as possible.
And that rounded bit, Sandy, I think often we look at that as just their technical skills, but actually there's huge value in someone understanding the empathy and the supportiveness that they need of someone who can't do something as well as they can. How can they help a batter who might be far more inexperienced than them try and win that game still? So it's not just about that batting at number 8, batting at number 4. It's the other stuff that comes with it. I'm just looking through these bits on the chat now, and there's some great points, and the majority of it is around engagement, enjoyment, love of the game. There's a bit that I can see about the transitioning into senior cricket, lifetime enjoyment of cricket, which is great to see. And I think one thing I was guilty of, so I was a young coach at Minehead Cricket Club. I started my journey, and I would have probably been far too competitive. So I can think of examples in games where I would change my plan based on what was happening within that game. I was very kind of inexperienced at the time, and now from a pathway point of view, I want the players involved to really place a high value on winning, but I don't see that as the be all and end all. And I'll never let them know that. I'll never say that the result isn't important, but for me, the process of what they're getting out the game is the far more important thing. And I think that leads into how I plan for a day of cricket. Is I'll be fairly meticulous with the opportunity that I want to provide people. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Is that on a match day, I give a lot of autonomy to the captain, because I want them to be able to learn that craft. I want them to be able to learn to manage a team. I want the team to be able to work together. But what that framework gives is it takes the ability to be too emotionally invested in the game away from the captain. They've got to still be clever, and they're still trying to win the game. But instead of them bringing back a batter who's already scored 100 in that game because they think that's the best opportunity to win that game, actually they've got to be really creative with how they use the bowlers that have been picked to bowl in that game to win the game of cricket. And there's obviously times when we won't do that. If we're involved in a under-18 competition and we're in the final stages, it will be a lot more about winning, because there are times where it's really important, particularly in knockout cricket. But that's just an example of how my journey has changed from being quite emotional about what was happening on the day, feeling probably a little bit responsible for whether there was a win or a loss, and how I'd be viewed. But actually now it's far more, just like all of you are saying in the chat box, it's far more about, it's more than just that one game of cricket. If I see someone developing a skill that I know that they've really struggled with, that's a win for me. That's a win that I'll encourage out of that player. So I think all those points that you've put there in the chat box, hold on to them and review against them on a match day. Are you making sure that you're ticking all those boxes, even when that game's getting tight and it is really easy to get involved in the competitiveness of it?
I think that's a really good point now, Drakes, and you beat me to it around actually, and you were very honest in how you've changed as a coach and that competitive edge. And actually, I think hopefully if you asked any coach why they coach, it would be because I want to develop kids, I want to give them enjoyment, all those brilliant reasons why everybody coaches. And then it's being able to live that through those games and not to get carried away, which is a hard thing to do. And I'm sure that every single coach out there will have fallen foul at some point, and I know certainly I have on many, many occasions. But it's like you said, being true to that. And I just want to pick up on one thing that Spencer mentioned about actually kids will play for different reasons, around some wanting to win, some wanting to develop their skills, others want to be active, the social side of it, and managing that is a real challenge. And I think what you guys have mentioned earlier around being open and honest with everyone, and actually if your gun player opens a batting and scores 30 and retires in every game, there's no benefit to them really. The team might win a couple of extra games. The kid's probably not going to develop much, as well as the rest of the team aren't going to get those same opportunities. But actually, if you're honest from the start and you say to them, right, this is about developing all of you guys, whether you've played for the county or whether this is your first game, and actually what's going to work for you. So for you who, rather than opening and scoring 30 every week, actually you're going to need to learn to come in down the order when things might be a little bit tricky or a different scenario, and develop your skills from there. So actually having that open, honest conversation at the start, so everyone's aware of it, and trying to develop that whole team can be really key. I'm aware of the time that's getting on very, very quickly. If anyone's got any questions on what we've just been speaking about for the last 15 minutes, stick them in the chat box now. Chunks, you look like you wanted to come in on something, so I'll come to you whilst we see if we have any questions come in.
Just kind of an open question to the other guys, really, around the important, with all that kind of talk around developing players and winning games and things like that. How much importance do you put on actually being able to be competitive in those games? So my personal belief is that kind of real for players to get something really kind of substantial out of a game, the more competitive the game is, the more they can learn from it. If it's kind of too one-sided either way, there's less kind of value, less learning that they can gain out of the game. So kind of with all those things in mind, do you guys think the kind of competitiveness is important?
Yeah, I'll start us off, Jugs. Yeah, definitely. We tend to learn more under pressure, don't we? And we tend to learn more when we make mistakes as human beings. And I don't think probably any of us are sat here saying winning isn't important at some point. And realistically, the higher you go up and the older you get, winning becomes more and more important. But not everyone's going to have that box to tick. There's a load of other things, and actually to sit here and say we're going to win at all costs for those 2 or 3 people who want that in the side and demand that, we're actually losing the interest of the other 8 or 9 players. And there's multiple ways that you can try and sort of challenge them and task them. And you might have guys coming in who don't play much cricket, and for them to get 10 not out at the death would be a really good effort to them, and that's almost like winning. But yeah, I think personally the competitiveness side of it will be a challenge to the coaches on the day. A lot of the coaches will probably be umpiring and scoring in a lot of club games and potentially district games, and it's thinking on your feet and managing those situations. And sort of we've had it before when we've played against each other, or Devon Somerset or Devon Cornwall, where we've had to think on our feet a little bit, and we've had to think outside the box and change things as much as we possibly can without interfering in the game too much, and suggesting things to players and captains, and maybe moving overs around or different situations to try and keep that competitive edge. And develop the players as best they can in that situation. And like Scott talked about, there's, for a lad who gets 50, 60 not out in a game every game, he's not learning much. And the players at the other end who are going at 10 runs and over and bowling 3 overs for 30 and getting taken off because they're getting whacked around, don't get anything out of it either. And it's managing those different situations as best as we can as coaches. And it is challenging at times. And I think the more you coach and the more you get to know the players, that becomes a little bit easier. But again, to me, it kind of reverts back to communication, having those conversations open and honest with your players, with their parents, and likewise with the opposition coaches. And it's probably not more of I use the term opposition coach. It's probably not that at all. It's, at the end of the day, if we're playing a few county age group games, and I'm sure the other guys would agree, we're more of probably a coaching team than we are opposition coaches. We're kind of all in it to get the best out of the 22, the 24 players who are there on the day. Actually, yeah, people will have success and failures on different days, but I think if we can walk away from the ground saying we've developed 24 players the best we can from the Southwest on that given day, we'll all walk away quite happy.
I think that's a really good point you made in there, Sandy, about not only being open and honest with your parents and players, but with the opposition coach or the other team's coach. And actually, I'm sure everyone's been to games where you know in advance it's going to be a completely one-sided affair, 200 plays 50 or whatever it might be. And actually there's that ownership on both coaches to see how can we make this game more valuable to both sets of players and pull that game a lot closer by whether it's manipulating batting orders and matching up people, whatever it might be, so that kind of everyone gets something out of that. We could talk about, go on, Drake, very quickly.
Just because I think it's important to say, so of us 4 on the call, I can give you some kind of examples of when that's happened recently. So we played a game against Dorset, a development squad game. last year, and the sides were slightly mismatched. So the game was a T20 game, and I think Dorset won that game in around the 12th over, something like that. And me and Scotty had a conversation, and actually we reframed that game for the players involved. So Dorset then needed to chase, let's say, 170 from the 20 overs. And going back into Chunks' point, for me, the players were still as competitive then as they were when there was a normal result on the game. I think kids are naturally competitive. They want to win. They want to get their mate out in a net. So I don't think, unless you really suppress it out of them, I don't think you're ever going to lose that. Some other examples of it would be just conversations that me and Sandy have had before a game about, right, how are we going to match it up from an age, from a size of the players involved point of view. It's obviously easier for us because we've got a great pool of players to pick from. And then the final example would have been last year, we were trying to find ways of making spin bowlers better and making batters more proactive against spin. So we had a rule that the spinners had to set a field that reflected more a professional field that they would see. So a certain amount of men out to encourage then players, when they used their feet and tried to manipulate the ball, they were rewarded. And also spinners were rewarded in the sense of it didn't become block, 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 try and hit over the top. It actually became more of a skill of bat v ball. So there's just a few examples of within pathway games, what we've done just through conversations. And that's in ECB competitions as well as friendly cricket. I don't think it needs to be exclusive to friendly matches. So that communication, that conversation is so important.
Thank you, Drakes. And we'll move on, but I think you mentioned there about competitive and kids are competitive, and that looks a whole load of different ways. And Stephen asked about how do we define competitive and what does that mean in junior club cricket? And I think you kind of touched on it there. That can mean a whole host of things. It might be individual games, it might be across the league season, it might be a matchup with a batter or a bowler, it might be competitive within themselves, and a whole host of different things. And then I think there's a couple of people have touched on that parent pressure as well, and actually that kind of comes back to those questions, or that kind of open honesty and communication in advance of parents being aware of what the aim of this team is. And if they know that you're trying to develop your under 13 players so they become better players, and that might mean winning games, it might mean losing games, it might mean all sorts of things, I think that becomes a lot easier than kind of springing it on them halfway through a game. We'll move on to our next topic. This summer is going to be very different to what would be a normal summer, because there's just been no lead in for any players. So kind of April the 1st, when everyone's allowed to, or certainly sports allowed to happen again, what does that mean for our players this summer? Drakes, we'll come to you first.
Cool. So I'm just going to start off again, just giving a bit of an insight into what we're looking to do from a pathway point of view, and I'm sure there'll be some points of discussion off that. So one thing I'm incredibly aware of is we've got about 350 players across our boys and girls pathway who ultimately what they've missed now is they've missed a full development winter cycle in terms of improving stuff that they would have really wanted to improve. But more importantly than that, a huge amount of them have lost engagement with the game. So whether that be that kind of informal play, their club nets, their school nets, whatever it may be, that's the bit I'm most conscious of. And I was in the same boat when we returned last summer. So one thing I was reluctant to do was to deselect players. Ordinarily, we would cut that 350 down to X number. And one thing we'll be doing this summer is we'll be leaving that decision as late as we can. So it's not a case of we're getting back outside on the 29th of March and, right, how can I find my best 14 players by the middle of May? It's not going to be like that. It's more going to be seen as these players have earned the right to be here. How can we keep them engaged? How can we give them different opportunities? There'll still be games for the for the players who need to be rewarded with the more challenging games, but it's trying to provide other opportunities for the players outside that as well. So I think that would be my first point about what's going to be unusual this summer. Is I think we've got a huge role as coaches to inspire and engage players, just because they've missed out on so much of that time. I'm going to hand over to Chunks, Scotty and Sandy, just because I'm aware that I'm speaking a lot. But what does your return to play look like from a, are you straight into your competitive fixtures? Are you starting off with some training? Are you starting off with some inter-squad match play? What does it look like across the region?
Our area, we had initially booked indoor nets for early April, before we knew what the roadmap looked like. So what we've done is we've still kept those bookings in the hope that after the 12th of April, if it is wet, we can go back indoors. But otherwise, we'll certainly be trying to train outdoors as best we can, but take on Matt's point of, you don't just go straight in at full intensity. There's a process that we've got to go through, whether it be bowling loads, the volume that players are allowed to hit, fielding, etc. I think there's a process that we should all go through in feeding the players back into competitive training and playing.
Yeah, I think we've kind of programmed, and we're going to go straight outside just because of issues around sort of where we can access and stuff. But we've booked in some sort of training days, and we'll look at some internal sort of intra matches, and then we'll start to move into sort of external county fixtures. But the one thing I'm sort of massively conscious of a little bit is when we come out of this a little bit more, that we're going to have, or that there's going to be so much pressure on the players. There's going to be pressure for them from school to catch up for what they've missed. I imagine all football clubs will want to start training, all rugby clubs will want to start training. You'll have badminton, hockey. No sports are going to want to wait till September to get going, I can't imagine. So we're going to have this massive sort of tug of war, really, with all these young players. And I think we need to be aware and understanding it's going to be a challenge for everyone, I think. And as well, I think if we touch on Drake's point around that engagement and that fun element and getting people back to loving cricket, not saying they've fallen out of love with cricket, but actually remind them of how they used to play when they were kids. And I know Jace up at Somerset, Jason Kerr is quite strong on that, listening to the call the other night around what he tasked the pros to do and go and sort of challenge themselves and try new things and stuff. And actually we've got quite a challenge to do that with our players and to get them back playing cricket when they've got all these demands in the outside world that's putting pressure on them. And I think that's something just to be aware of straight away, because it's not going to be easy for anyone, I don't think. And likewise it's kind of what are our expectations of our players in terms of ability wise and skill level. Not many of them would have played any cricket for probably 9 months or done anything for 9 months, really. And if we're expecting them to pick up a bat and a ball and be like they were last August, I think we need to be quite realistic that that's going to take a bit of time. And that should kind of influence probably what you do at your early sessions. Actually, is it about volume and repetition and getting players back into playing and enjoying? Or is it about actually we'll bung 12 kids into a net and let them go for 2 hours? Arguably, that's probably not the best thing. Is there anything that we could do to engage them and give them more volume and more repetition in that time to prepare them for a busy summer of cricket and sport?
From our perspective in Cornwall, kind of in terms of pathway stuff, we're looking at using the month of April, either indoors or outdoors. Obviously, indoors would be the second half of April, which might actually be a good option for us, bearing in mind sort of condition of facilities and stuff at that time of year. But just using that time during April there to give those players opportunity just to get back in, kind of dust the cobwebs off a little bit, because like I said, it is a long time from having kind of performed those skills before. Just giving them opportunity to bat, bowl, field, keep, get back into it, and then following that, kind of playing internal games. So games, but they're playing kind of inter-squad games and things like that, where they can practice their skills in a game type environment. And I kind of think that's actually a really important aspect of cricket, especially, that potentially we can be a bit better at. So by that I mean that we spend time in the winter and time during the season in nets and things like that, working on skills, working on different things, and we try and create scenarios and all those types of competitive situations in an indoor net, for example. But for a young girl or boy, that regardless of their experience, for me, there needs to be kind of a bit more of a transition from that practice session into a game, where the sort of tension and anxiety around playing the game, playing the match, can affect how that skill transitions. So being able to play, kind of have middle practices, if you like, that can be dressed up as games or scenarios or certain situations in a game. Drake, as you mentioned earlier about kind of batters getting stuck batting against spin and going block, 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 and then trying to smack it out the ground, actually setting up middle practices so that players can see fielders and they can look to see, right, in this session I'm trying to develop this aspect of working the ball into that gap, hitting the ball into that gap. For young players, it might just be that early experience of putting on the pads in a match type situation and just feeling what it's like going out into the middle for an early opportunity. I think that's a really important aspect in not just this summer, but kind of going forward as well. But then internally, what we're doing, kind of the internal games, and then playing sort of a county age group type stuff later on in the summer, as the same as you guys then. But yeah, I guess my point is the big one around that transition between net skills training type stuff and actual match situations.
Thank you, gents, and thank you, Chunks. And some really good points, I think, around actually just easing kids back into ultimately to match play through a whole range of different ways of doing it. But I think we spent kind of the first half an hour talking about developing them through competition and kind of looking at matches, but you've raised some really good points there, Chunks, around actually middle practice scenario work. There's still competition within that, just in a different level, that actually can really help players. If you're moving your players around the order and you know that someone who's never opened before is going to do it in the next game, well, actually you can have a middle practice and they can fulfill that role or whatever it might be, and just give those players the opportunity within those practices that is going to help them develop that way as well. We'll move on because I think the next topic is quite a big one, and one that I think is important for coaches as well and can play a real role in that. And I think we've mentioned about how we can kind of manipulate junior cricket, and we can potentially have a bit more of a focus on participation as opposed to competition, and help players develop that way. That probably changes quite a lot when they transition into senior cricket. So actually, as coaches, how can we help that transition? Richard, do you want to kick off on that one with your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a look at this topic earlier today, and it's quite relevant to me because the club that I'm affiliated to is Wimborne Cricket Club, and they're starting a 4th 11 this season, specifically for parents, senior players, and county players, or good enough players to play in adult cricket from under 12s to integrate it to make up the 4th 11. And actually, when I started to give it some thought, I come up with a bit of a tick box that, surprised me in the detail that you've got to go into. So my initial observations was that it's essential that you have a captain that understands his lineup and where the young players bat and bowl based on the opposition, the pitch, and the maturity of the players under his tenure. The parents, the senior players, understand their responsibility as role models, encouraged to ensure experience the young players is fulfilled. So what does that look like? Their league looks competitive in terms of local derbies. So it's going to be quite a competitive league. I think you sense check the opposition and the venues in terms of what's the pitches like at 4th 11 standard. Some are going to be poor, some are going to be good. So I think you get a feel for where you give the different younger players their roles. Communication, I think, with county age group coaches, where you're utilising their players, is massive from a club point of view. So everyone's got to be in the loop in terms of, you know, where this player's playing, what the expectations are, and the roles that he's going to be given. And obviously, early season, we just brushed on this. You want to be practicing on decent surfaces, integrating the younger players into the senior practice. Obviously, we all survive at club level on a lot of AstroTurf nets, and a lot of them bounce too much. But I think we just got to be really wary of, you know, how we integrate our players in practice, so they're not like rabbit in the headlights when it comes to the challenge of matches. Just moving on to patience and sticking with these young guys. It comes with all the players, the senior players, understanding challenges in front of the young players. I think we can all remember those nerves that we had when we were young men, making our way in the game. Now, times have changed. Obviously, there's a few people on this call of my vintage that will remember just enjoying fielding as a young player, you know, and being satisfied with that. But the landscape's changed immeasurably in terms of what the player expects from his experience and what the parents and the other players expect. So Andy Flower always explained to me that his experiences of playing with accountants, farmers, solicitors, professionals led the way he thought as a cricketer and a leader. So I think it's senior players or parents, when we're integrating young players into our sides, I think the awareness that we show in the experiences they're getting is massive. Just lost you there. And is the player ready? Well, that's just sense check through your county age groups. Again, communicating with your coaches. So, you know, the way that they are physically, their profile as a cricketer, it makes a massive difference on how they're integrated into your side. So that's really the notes I wrote down. But, you know, I was amazed at the detail I had to go into to actually take into account how sensitive it can be in making sure that we create a really good environment for these young players and ensuring that their first experience in adult cricket is a really good one. Guys, I don't know if you've got stuff to add to that.
I've just got one thing on. It's not so much that initial transition, but I think what can happen sometimes, and I've seen it happen in the past and been involved in conversations like it, is it takes some real clarity and some good thought from someone to properly acknowledge where the player is best situated. So I think sometimes we get really excited about young players and we want to give them an opportunity in the first team because that's the best environment to play in. But what quite often happens with that is that they will end up batting at 8. They'll end up fielding at fine leg. And from an actual experience point of view, there'll be some really good observational things for them. But in terms of learning on the job, there's not much. So I think a real conversation, a valuable conversation to have is what's the opportunity in this team versus what's the opportunity in that team, and then what does that give the player? So for me, a batter who's getting opportunity to bat in the top 4 in the second team, it's always going to be a better opportunity initially than batting at 8 in the first team. There might come a time where actually you want to give him a bit of exposure to just the environment because you're trying to set him up for the next summer, that's fine. But I think that's really important. And also my final point for club coaches particularly, or even adults involved within the club, just being more willing to give young players a chance. There was a great article I read the other day about football, and in the Bundesliga at the moment, we've got loads of English players going over there and they're playing Champions League football as 17-year-olds. Yet the general feedback that those players feel they're getting within their English environments is, you're not experienced enough to play first team football, which makes no sense at all, because the only way you can get that experience is by learning, experiencing, and ultimately trying to adapt to that environment. So yeah, we need to be more willing to give those opportunities, even if it means sometimes upsetting someone who feels they're better placed to have that opportunity. And obviously it's a balance, because you don't want to put those players off playing, but we can't see being young as a reason why someone shouldn't be playing. We need to actually figure out what they need and what's going to help them become the better player.
I think it's a massive challenge, because if you look at club cricket and you've got 10 players and you need to fill that kind of number 8, 9, number 9 spot that probably won't bowl and probably won't bat. I think most clubs, if we're honest, will go for probably the best youngster who's happy to travel most or half the way across the county to play a first team game. Whereas actually we need to probably stand there and say, actually, is this the best opportunity for our best young player? Or is it to bat in the top 4 or open the bowling in the second team? And that's a challenge we have at clubs, really, because it's very difficult to try and tell a 30 plus boy or woman, lady who's got 2 kids at home to travel 3/4 of the way across the county and not bat and not bowl in the first team, but they'll happily play at home for the second team and bat and bowl. So it's a really difficult conversation to have, and I think that goes back to the philosophy a little bit of what your club's about and what you're looking to do with your junior section and your young players. And I just wanted to touch on a point in the chat box from David around mindful of how your higher performing players get their best experiences and their needs. And I think the guys on the call would probably agree with me that our most beneficial games are probably our cross age group games, where we play players from probably 2 or 3 age groups in fixtures. And this is kind of where you see the best out of them. So the better younger players come up, and the sort of more mature, probably more understanding older guys play in those games and manage the fixtures a little bit more. And you tend to see a lot more from players. And traditionally at club level, we're very restricted by age groups, it seems. And I just wonder if we can have a little bit more flexibility around what we do at age group cricket. So the little batter in the under 14s who hasn't grown and struggling to hit it off the square, could they play in the under 13s age group? And your big opening under 13 bowler who gets fifers for fun in club cricket, could they be challenged at under 14s, under 15s cricket, or in the 4th team or the 3rd team with some seasoned pros who can actually say, look, probably opening the bowling against the overseas player isn't the best option, but when they're 3 or 4 down and the game's under a little bit of control, then actually we can give an opportunity to our younger players. Or if you've got a young batter, throwing them in at 3 with 2 inexperienced guys at opening and at 4, or have you got your old pro who can bat at either side of the new guy and just kind of manage them through the situation. And it's all kind of utopia things we're saying here, and I think we're all understanding that it's never always that easy. These are all suggestions, and it will take a lot to get rid of age groups in junior cricket and say, can we do it on ability based? But I think that's a kind of utopia situation that a lot of people on this screen would probably see benefit from, and there's a few nodding heads that I can see. Actually, can we pick even sides as opposed to age group sides?
In terms of that kind of question that Scotty started with there just now around kind of younger players transitioning into adult cricket, actually I think it's a real tough one now for 12, 13-year-olds, boys and girls, transitioning into adult cricket. You've got, I think now the pitch lengths have changed somewhat. You've got some quite big changes potentially from them playing a junior game on a Friday night, bowling off maybe 19 yards, to playing a Saturday or a Sunday adult game of cricket and having to bowl over 22 yards with a different size ball and all those things. I think over time we're going to find that, you know, kind of people are more adaptable to those things, but I think it's a tough ask going in. I'm just going to revisit a couple of things we've spoken earlier about, and that was kind of purpose and, you know, what is the purpose of those young people playing those games and ensuring that they get a really good experience from it. But also communication, I think that's a really big one. Scotty mentioned about the role of the captain in kind of integrating that young player into an adult team. But actually, I think it goes further than that. I think is communication within the whole team. You know, let's say it is a 13-year-old young player coming into adult cricket for the first time, and maybe physically they're not the biggest, the strongest, and they're coming in a lower league game where the bowling's maybe a little bit slower, or the fielders are in front of the bat, and that little batter can't get it off the square. Actually, for me, there's communication with the players that bat with that young player, to understand that actually that young player needs a bit of help to get off strike, and understand that actually you can't just be sat on your bat handle at the other end. Actually, you've got to be trying to look to get off strike and potentially trying to share options with them while you're batting with them of how you're going to do it, work out a plan while you're there. So I think there's kind of a lot of challenges, but I think within good communication within an adult team, actually, generally, most adults are pretty keen to help young players through that.
I think thank you, Chunks, and everyone else. I think some really nice points started off by Richard there and come for all of you and finish with you there, Chunks, at the end around, again, that communication and actually the role of a coach. Kind of, we've got them to adult cricket, we're done. There's still kind of a few key steps to go through, and whether it's if you're not playing in that team, so you can't support the captain or help those players on the day, actually picking up the phone and having a conversation with the captain and going, so-and-so is coming up to play in your team. This is what to expect of them. This is what they can do. This is what they may struggle with or may find challenging. This is how best you can support them. And then that conversation rippling down through the side. So exactly like you said, your 14-year-old batter who can't hit the ball off the square doesn't have 8 senior players having a go at him going, why the hell is he in the side or she in the side, can't score any runs, what's going on, we're losing because of them. Actually having that call up front. We'll call it kind of to a close there. We knew this would be a challenge. When we had our meeting last week to plan for this, it went on for 3 days, so we knew an hour would be a challenge to fit in. If anyone's got any questions kind of on anything we've touched on tonight, feel free to put them in the chat box now, and we'll answer a couple of those. Whilst you're doing that, I'm going to ask all you guys the same question, and this is going to be a 5-second answer. If you could give one piece of advice for coaches to take back to their clubs and junior sections around competitions, matches, competitiveness, what would it be? Chunks, we'll go with you first.
I agree on purpose.
Brilliant, thank you.
Less than 5 seconds. Sandy, you got 8 now.
That was brilliant. Sandy?
I would say just walk away asking yourself one question is, have you helped / made every player better in that day or environment? And if you struggled on that day, then make them the priority the next day.
Thank you, Sandy. Always struggle with time in Devon.
Yeah.
Richard?
Stand still.
I think empathy with players, totally that understanding their strengths and weaknesses. Make sure you service them all.
Brilliant. Thank you. Drake?
You've absolutely stuffed me with the final one. I think they've summed it up brilliantly. Communicate well, review your own reason as to why you do that day. You've all written in the chat box why you do it. Have you fulfilled that for the players? And yeah, then the following that up with empathy. There'll be times we get it wrong, but actually, can you make that player go away feeling that they're going to have opportunity or that they've actually got something from the day? I think that's an important thing. So yeah, just the same as everyone else said, really.
Brilliant. Thank you, gents. We've not had any questions yet. Well, I'll just plug the next 2 webinars in case we do have any more come in. So next Monday, we've got one on developing and supporting captains with Tom Abel. And then on Tuesday night, we're talking about coaching girls cricket with Sophie Luff. So you can still sign up to them in the same way. Sandy, were you going to touch on something there?
Yeah. Sorry. I just quickly, I know we've got no questions now and people might go away and mull it over watching Coronation Street or whatever's on later on this evening. But you've got guys in your counties, really good guys who can help and support and facilitate these conversations. It's not just one evening tonight. There's people in every county that can help those conversations. And if you've come to a bit of a dead end of where you can go or any suggestions, then pick up a phone, drop an email. I'm sure anyone on this call and all the teams around the counties would be more than happy to help and give you suggestions and have an open conversation with you to help try and get things moving forward in the right direction.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sandy. And I extend that to having phone conversations with the guys and girls that you're playing against as well. I had a conversation yesterday with a team that we're playing at under 10s this season and said to them, we're going to have some 11-year-olds because they won't be ready for under 13 hardball cricket yet. Are you happy for them to play? And it was an unequivocal yes. So I'm sure if you have those conversations with people in advance, there are more than one ways to skin a cat, so it were, and make sure everyone gets something out of the game. Drake's has put his email address on there, so you're more than welcome to send any questions to him as well. But otherwise, thank you very much for this evening for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you at some point in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandy, Chunks, Rich, and Drakes.
Pleasure.